Every 9 seconds in the United States, a woman is assaulted or beaten. Around the world, at least 1 in every 3 women has been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused during her lifetime. Thus, Women in Distress of Broward County is on a mission to stop domestic violence abuse for everyone through intervention, education, and advocacy. Women in Distress has helped countless families affected by domestic violence to find safety and hope for over 43 years. Learn more, get support, or donate at womenindistress.org. Welcome back to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicherter, and today I'm joined by my dear friend, Alisa Gonzales, who works in education and prevention at Women in Distress of Broward County. Before we begin, I just want to check in. How are you really?
I'm doing really good today. It's been an early morning here where I'm at, but honestly, I'm having a really good day and I'm really looking forward to this.
Likewise, we met through Sophie Barin, through the Conversationalist, and you've just been an amazing advocate for change, for conversation, and just making our voices heard, which is why I'm so excited for this conversation with you. Today, we're going to talk about Women's in Distress and the work you do there. So can you tell us a little bit more about the organization?
Yeah, sure. So Women in Distress is a domestic violence center located in Broward County, Florida. Our mission here is to stop domestic abuse for everyone through intervention, education, and advocacy. We offer various services to the people, that might be experiencing abuse in their area. And we kind of provide multiple different avenues for them to go through, whatever feels best fitting for them. We have a crisis hotline that's 24 hours, 7 days a week that anyone can call if they're just want to talk to someone, if they're experiencing an abusive situation and need to get out of it. Really just anything that they might be experiencing. We do education and prevention, which is the role that I play, where I go into the community and I talk to people in the community. Sometimes I go into schools, I talk to professionals, I go to other agencies and do, different presentations or activities or workshops with them. We also have an emergency shelter for people who need to flee an abusive situation and need somewhere to stay. We have a pet shelter for those who do come to our emergency shelter where they can bring their pets as well. We have outreach services, therapy services, group, individual, and family. And we just have various options for resources for those who are experiencing abuse.
You really do it all. There's not enough conversation on domestic violence and what resources are available, which I believe is one of the reasons so many people don't reach out for help because they don't know what's available to them. On top of that fear of what's going to happen to me. So before we jump further into Women in Distress and the work that you do, can you define domestic violence for us?
Absolutely. So the best way for me to define domestic violence would be when one person is trying to gain and maintain power and control over another person in any form of relationship, and doing so in a way that is, what it could be physical, it could be mental, it could be psychological, emotional, any of those things, financial. And it's something that crosses all boundaries of culture, age, race, sex, gender, identities, sexual orientation, education level, socioeconomic status. It can affect anyone. And that's just a little bit about, that's probably what I would tell someone if they were to ask me what domestic violence is.
Thank you for defining it. I don't think a lot of people realize that it's more than just, I don't want to say just, but it's more than being physically abused by somebody. And it's more than just a male hurting a female who they're married to. It's more than that. And because of the limited view of what we often see or think domestic violence to be, a lot of people aren't sure, am I in that situation? Is that me? Which is why I love that you do a lot of education and prevention piece. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So with education and prevention, our goal is we can stop the issue before it starts. We can help people recognize signs and red flags and things like that. We could teach people how to have healthy relationships with themselves and with other people. The work I primarily do is actually with high school students. I go into schools and I talk to them about healthy relationships, unhealthy and abusive relationships, like those signs and things. I talk to them about consent and boundaries and sexual violence and how that plays a part, as well as doing interactive activities with them. We talk a lot about identity and how that plays a part, like privilege and oppression, how that plays a part in someone's experience with domestic violence. Because of that power and control aspect, that's definitely something that we touch on, as well as like what it looks like to help a friend and talking about victim blaming and how we can be helpful and supportive to friends without placing our own judgments on them. We talk about how it's our job as friends or as bystanders to be listeners, active listeners, and show empathy. It's not our job to be the investigator, the detective, or the judge. And so kind of teaching students at the high school level of like what that looks like. We use a program called BOLD. It stands for Building Opportunities to Love with Dignity. And we basically go through those different sessions. We have 5 sessions total about the topics that I just mentioned. And we also do interactive activities within that. We even do one activity where the students actually get to walk in the shoes of a survivor. That activity is called In Their Shoes. It's a kit activity. You can look it up online and you can probably actually see like what it looks like. And basically they follow character cards and they get to make decisions based off of the experience that character is having, and they are able to make decisions and choices, and it kind of helps them understand how difficult it can be to navigate that kind of situation. And then we get to go into a discussion of like what that looks like when it comes to empathy, when it comes to listening to someone, getting someone resources. Not everyone is going to have the same access to the same resources or is going to feel comfortable reaching out to the same resources. And so learning how to give someone the right to autonomy and self-determination of what they want to do in their situation, things like that.
This program is incredible. I mean, growing up, I never had any conversation like this. No one talked about it, let alone made a program, a course where we could actually learn what it's like, what it means, how to support someone who's going through it, and what it would be like in that situation to make decisions. It is so important that we have this education prevention piece so people know if this is happening to me. They know what resources are available. They know how to figure out what resources they could reach out to. They know how to support someone or even see warning signs for someone and be part of a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece of that also is we get to teach people how to hold others accountable, because a lot of the times when we talk about domestic violence or relationships or just anything having to do with two people having some form of relationship, whether that's a friendship, a romantic relationship, it could be family, it could be anything. Oftentimes we see the pressure get put on the victim in the situation, the pressure get put on the person who's having the experience. And so it's really important for us to shift that perspective and do that at a young age, to where, we all have victim blaming tendencies. It's just our nature as humans. We judge because it helps protect us. When we are experiencing something, if we walk into a room, we want to make sure we're looking around, making sure the room is safe. Sometimes people's responses are not to intentionally be victim blaming, but sometimes it does come across that way, and it only further, pushes the person into a harmful direction versus getting them to support that they need. And so we help the students and professionals and just anyone we have these conversations with understand like how they can shift that perspective. For example, instead of saying like, oh my gosh, why did she go back? Or, oh my gosh, why did he go back? Asking yourself, why does the person keep abusing? Why does the person keep harming? And shifting that perspective, because we oftentimes that's not our automatic thinking. That's not what we're going to go to first.
Yes. How many times do you hear someone say, well, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't they just leave? Why did they stay? And then trying to analyze, well, maybe it was for the money or for the security or for the safety. And it goes into all these different reasons we can blame someone for staying instead of for the person who's hurting them. Why are they hurting them? Why is the situation blaming the victim, the survivor, instead of the person who is actively abusing and hurting someone?
Yeah, absolutely. And to speak on that, abuse is a choice. It's also a learned behavior, so we know it can be unlearned. And oftentimes people don't realize what they're doing or how they're acting until someone brings it to their awareness and educates them on that. There's a lot of people who may, have been abused themselves or experiencing it themselves at home or with it within their friend group or whatever that might look like for them. And they think this is the appropriate way to act. And so also by us talking to students, talking to people, we're bringing an awareness of like, this is what's not okay and how you should not treat people or yourself. And this is the right way of how you should treat others and how you should treat yourself. And it's really important because the most important relationship we have is with ourselves. If we aren't filling our cups, it's hard to fill other people's cups. If we aren't taking care of ourselves or practicing healthy relationships, we can't expect the relationships that we have to be healthy relationships. And so I think that's the thing I hold on to the most in the conversation is abuse is learned. Domestic violence is learned. So that means that it can be unlearned. And that's the beauty of prevention is because we could be sitting in a classroom with people. We have to stay open-minded and realize that half of the class might be people who have abusive traits or have been abusive towards others. We have to look at the half of the room might be people who have experienced this. There might be another part of the room who have no idea what we're talking about. And this is their first time being exposed to it. And so understanding that when we go into those spaces, we have to go there with empathy and understanding that there are many different people in the room who have different perspectives, and it's okay for them to challenge us. It's okay to ask questions because that's the only way we're going to learn how to do better.
That is such an amazing point to bring up. When you're going into these spaces, a lot of times when it comes to prevention work, even, we're working with a specific population. We're working with someone who's specifically in the experience and preventing further instead of starting at hopefully the beginning or somewhere where everyone can be part of the conversation. People who may be there currently themselves, who may know someone who's experienced it or is experiencing it, who may have no idea, who may only have an idea from movies that they're watching, and being able to create a conversation where everyone can be involved and learn something and go home with hopefully new information and some kind of action plan or understanding of what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, within prevention and education, oftentimes, we also don't look at all the perspectives or all the sides of like how we can have these conversations. One thing that I think about a lot is like how can we do prevention work from different perspectives. So for example, we really focus on like the survivor's perspective right now and supporting survivors and how to help and all of those things. And something that's like been on my mind and my heart is like, how can we also look at it from the abuser's perspective? And how can we, train ourselves and talk in an education and prevention way specifically targeted towards abusers to hold them accountable and to talk through those things. Where is this coming from? How can we unlearn it? Once we understand that, we can, reach even more people to hopefully prevent the problem in a different way, but still be effective. I think that's something that I really want to work on and hope that we can work towards, because right now there's not a lot of support for people who are on the other side of it. Oftentimes, if someone is, let's say they get arrested and they go to court, a judge might say, okay, you need anger management, and this is, how we're going to solve this issue. When in fact, that's not the issue at hand. Their issue is power and control. It's not anger. They might have anger issues. That might be something that exacerbates the problem. But ultimately, with domestic violence, the foundation of it, or how it thrives, is that power and control dynamic. And so, even the systems in place don't fully understand what it is that the abuser, what their mind is like, or what what they are experiencing and how they are portraying, how they're showing up in the actions and behaviors that they're doing. And it just further creates more problems versus hopefully finding more of a solution or getting that person help, because everyone deserves help. Everyone deserves an equal opportunity to receive help. Even people who are abusive or who are doing harmful things. That's how I personally feel. I think that everyone deserves access to help.
There's very limited help in getting them the support they need to move through that. So they end up continuing the cycle. So what can we do to give them that support, whether it is starting at the beginning with the prevention, or people who have moved past that and are now in this system? How can we help them so that eventually they can have loved ones that have a healthy relationship, love themselves, love them, and find that piece of fulfillment? Because like you said, it's learned behavior. So how can we help people unlearn?
I think that's something I actively think of and like want to work towards, especially because there's not a lot of information or research out there, because it's just not something that's focused on. That's just something personally I value and want to work towards and understand a little bit better, because once we understand the root of the issue, we can do so much work to prevent it. When you're talking about someone who's abusive, since the center of that is power and control, how can we help someone not feel like they have to gain and maintain power and control over another person? How can we support them in a way that they're unlearning the behaviors that they were taught? Just because someone is taught something does not give them the right or, make it, that's not an excuse to treat other people in a harmful way. And it's all about accountability. If someone wants to change, they'll change. But if someone doesn't want to, they won't. And so we have to be okay with that and understand that it looks different for different people. The same way survivors get help differently, so will abusers, once we move towards like a prevention strategy in that way. I also think that with that being said, it's important for us to remember that regardless of if someone was taught, if the person is actively being abused themselves, all of those things, they're still actively making a choice to do it to another person. So I don't want it to come across off as, this person is experiencing this, so this is why. It might be a reason why they are acting the way they are, but it's still never an excuse and never, discounts that there's other people in the situation. It's not just black and white. It's nuanced. It's important for us to remember that when we're having these conversations, I think.
Absolutely. There's never, ever an excuse. Like you said, being able to find the root cause, where that learned behavior came from, what is triggering this behavior in them, and then how can we support them? Are they willing to listen, to reach out for support, to get the support? What can we do then? Never making an excuse for the behavior, which is something that sometimes comes up when we have conversations like this, is, oh, but they went through that. Oh, but they were abused. They were in this situation. And recognizing that someone can be in a very bad situation and learn this behavior, but they are aware of how that behavior hurt them, and they're choosing, like you said, to do that behavior to someone else. So can we get them to a point where they want support, where they want to unlearn the behavior? And at that point, what can we do? How can we figure out the root cause, and how can we move forward is something that's super important as we work into moving toward prevention and rehabilitation. We've been talking a lot about learned behavior. Could you maybe give us some examples of how someone can learn abusive behavior or domestic violence behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually a little bit of information on men who, and it's not to say that men are the ones who abuse and women are the ones who are victims. It can happen to anyone. As I said before, it crosses all boundaries of all the things. But it often is a women-centered issue. It's an issue that affects women probably the most. Statistically, 1 in 3 women will experience abuse in their lifetime, or some form of domestic violence. We also know the statistics for men are about, I think it's 1 in 10 men which may not be accurate because men are less likely to report based off of the stigmas behind their victimization and things like that. But, something that I kind of remember is one of my first trainings that I sat through was that we did like a true and false scenario of different questions. And one of them was, the question was, most men who abuse their partners grew up in violent homes. And the answer is true. In observing intimate partner violence in childhood, it increases the risk of later perpetration for men by like 56 to 63%, depending on the severity. And so knowing that statistic and realizing that a lot of times what it is someone is growing up in a violent home and seeing this actively, that's where our work comes in. Because someone may be actively experiencing these things at home, right? But they have someone coming into their school and telling them the behaviors that are not okay. We're telling these students the ways to be healthier, how to have conversations, how to set boundaries, how to, communicate effectively, all of those things. So even if they are going home and experiencing that, they're also getting that other perspective. So I think that's the biggest way we can help people unlearn is by having these conversations. It's so important. Especially if you everybody always says, see something, say something, see something, say something. And I think we hear that a lot and we might act on it, but it's so important because it could be the difference between someone becoming abusive or not, someone's life or death. It could be the difference between the trajectory of their life changing. And that sounds really dramatic sometimes, but it's so true. I'll even disclose about myself. I grew up in a home with domestic violence. It's something that I saw every day, and it was something that I experienced firsthand. But in learning what was not okay and what is not appropriate, the inappropriate ways to act with someone or to treat someone, I was able to decide if I was going to go that route or if I was going to change the cycle, kind of like what you brought up. And in actively making that decision, now I work with people who experience domestic violence, and this is something that I'm passionate about and I'm able to talk about. And it's empowering for me as a survivor to be able to talk about these issues and to be able to help other people the same way I was advocated for. That's my goal, is to advocate for others in the same way. I think that with that also, I had to recognize a lot of the toxic behaviors I had in myself when I first started learning about what's right and what's wrong. And when it was brought to my attention, knowing I had to make an active decision in changing or working on those behaviors, and nobody else could do it for me. It's something I had to do myself. And so encouraging people, who might be in that situation where they're unlearning some of their behaviors, it's not your responsibility to walk along their journey with them, but it could be encouraging for you to say, I see the changes you're making. These are things that I'm seeing that are changed. I'm really proud of you. Or these are the things that I'm noticing that are different and are going in a more positive direction, things like that. Or if you see someone, being abusive or showing those characteristics, those toxic traits, those red flags, calling them into the conversation, not saying, hey, you're abusive, but saying, hey, I think some of the traits that you have, or some of the behaviors that you're acting on are not appropriate. I think we should talk about this. And as long as you're in a safe place and a comfortable place to do so, holding them accountable to those actions.
I am so proud of you, first of all, for taking an experience that so easily could have been an excuse to hurt others, which we often see, and turning it as a reason to help others and to not just break the cycle, but change it so that people don't have to go through this, that warning signs are seen, that kids grow up knowing what to look out for and how to have a conversation, how to support someone else. And that is amazing. And again, I am so proud of you, and I'm so honored to be your friend and to know you and get to watch you do this work. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that and disclosing with us, because people are afraid to have these conversations. People are afraid to open up and say, hey, I've been there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's another part of it is everyone should share their stories when they feel comfortable and when it feels best fit for them if it ever does, it's not always a safe thing for people to share. It might not be something you want to share publicly. It might be something you only want to share with a selective group, or maybe you never share at all. But for me, it felt empowering to share my story when appropriate, of course, and also, realize how important my story is and how important everyone's stories are. They're all different, but, we've all, like, the people who've had stories or have experienced this, we all have one thing in common, which is that this is an experience that doesn't leave us. It's not something that will, one day we'll wake up and be like, oh, that never happened to me. It's something we'll carry for the rest of our lives. And there are so many other circumstances. It doesn't have to just be domestic violence, it could be anything. And having that active choice of like flipping that script or like changing that perspective of, I'm not going to let this hurt me. I'm going to use this to help others. I'm going to use this to empower myself and empower other people. It really does shift, how you feel about yourself, the relationship you have with yourself, the way you show up in relationships with other people, and the way you show up in the world in general. So I think it's so important when you're ready, if you're ready, to, either share your story or, reflect on your experience and like what that feels like for you and how those experiences have shaped you into who you are today and like all of those kinds of things.
Absolutely. When and if you're ready, being able to have that conversation, reflect, or help people find resources. Whether or not you openly share that you've gone through it, just sharing a resource on social media can be huge. And for me, that's something that I'm so passionate about, is finding ways to just share resources and just make other people aware that there's resources out there, whether or not you're comfortable or ever in a safe position to be able to say, this is what I'm going through, this is what I have gone through. But just knowing that resources, especially among your close friend group, if you feel comfortable, being able to let people know what resources are available. I really want to go into the education prevention piece in high schools. So I'm wondering, for parents who may not be sure what a conversation on domestic violence prevention may look like, schools who may be hesitant to let people have these conversations at schools, what can you tell them about it and why it's important, so that maybe we lift some of that fear away and more conversations are happening?
Absolutely. That's a really great question. For us, we actually, within Broward County schools, we get approval letters and things like that to be able to do our programming. We're willing to provide the curriculum and the site coordinator guides and all of that to the people who are curious or want to know more about our programming. We've been doing this for years, so it's just, we kind of have our foot in the door and people feel comfortable having us there. But in general, I think when it comes to parents, the thing I would tell a parent is how it's so important to talk about, because this is something that unfortunately teenagers are experiencing. This is something that we see happen way too often, even amongst teenagers. 1 in 3 teenagers will experience dating violence in the United States, and only 33% will ever tell anyone. Out of that 33%, the people who they're going to tell first are their friends and peers. And so we might not realize it as adults. We might feel far from it. We might not think that it's something that happens, actively, but it's something that, at any age people can experience. And with the statistics of teenagers, we see that, 1 in 3 teenagers. So just sitting in a room, a classroom, you can imagine how many people in there might have experienced it or knew someone who have experienced it. I think that when your student or your child is, at an age where we can talk about these things and hopefully prevent a lot of future, I don't like using the word issues, but for lack of better words, issues, future experiences, we can give them the toolbox that they need to have healthy relationships with themselves and others. I think that's so important for the foundation of how people view themselves and how they view relationships. We talk about many different things, and we do it at age appropriate levels. We even have a middle school program called Imagine. And we try and do it in a way that the students can relate with by incorporating, social media or TV shows or movies that they've seen or things like that. For example, we talk about consent and boundaries, and we use a rom-com called To All the Boys I Loved Before. We use a scene from that movie to explain consent to the students. We talk about what healthy relationships look like by using examples of things that they experience. Like, for example, we ask them questions like, right now in this generation, sharing locations is a really big thing. And so we ask them questions like, is it healthy, unhealthy, or abusive for someone to ask for your location? And we do like this spectrum activity where they're hanging on the walls, there are the words unhealthy, healthy, and abusive. And the students have to choose where they would stand, how they feel, because relationships are a spectrum. With healthy relationships, it means two people are comfortable, both people. With an unhealthy relationship, it means one person's uncomfortable, one person's comfortable. And with an abusive relationship, it means one person's not only uncomfortable, but they're also fearful. They're scared. There's something there that's not just unhealthy, but getting into, a form of abuse. And so we're able to talk through those things, and just hearing students have a space to talk about how they feel about those things, a question that they probably would never be asked otherwise, a thought that they might not ever have, and seeing them actively like work through the scenario. Some of them even change the spots they're standing in. We're able to like really debrief all of those things, and just seeing like all the knowledge that they gain is wonderful. And I wish that every single teenager, I wish I had this when I was a teenager. And I wish that every single teenager in Broward County and otherwise would have some form of training or understanding of relationships a little more.
Same. I wish someone would have taught me that earlier in life, and I would have had a chance where someone explained the difference between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive, and given us a chance to figure out where we stand and what different pieces, like you said, sharing your location. Are you sharing your location because you're comfortable and you feel safe with this person having your location, or do you feel it's a sense of control? Are you worried about your safety with someone having your location? Being able to ask yourself the different aspects. Even with social media and people you're following and things you're posting, are you comfortable? Do you feel pressured? Where are you along this spectrum? The way people respond, and looking at how it's not just in a physical relationship, romantic relationship, but even in friendships, even with family members who may be your age, younger than you, older than you, just anyone in your life, and how different relationships can look. So important to know that maybe I feel this is happening as a sense of control over me, and I feel like I don't have the chance to set boundaries or make a decision for myself, and my life is just not in my hands, and I don't feel comfortable or okay with that. And now how can I learn to set boundaries or start a conversation or find resources that are available to help me through this? Because maybe I can't do it by myself. Maybe I need a therapist or a social worker or a teacher, some kind of trusted adult to guide me on how to have this conversation or be there during the conversation. But if we're not talking about it, we're not learning about it, how do we know? How do we know until honestly it's too late and we're in that situation and we're scared and we don't know what to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also okay for parents to have concerns, or teachers, or anyone to have concerns. But I think what I always go back to is teenagers are going to become adults who are going to be in relationships if they're not already in relationships now. Everyone has relationships, even if they're not intimate or romantic. Friendships are relationships. Family, things are relationships. Having a relationship with yourself is a form of relationship, and is the most important one. I think I've said that like 3 times already, but just to make sure everyone knows. And so I think kind of putting myself in that perspective and explaining that to people who might have a little bit of concern, I think that concern is valid. These are difficult conversations, but most difficult conversations are also necessary conversations. And I think that's what I often go back to is how is this conversation now going to impact how this student or this person or this child or teenager is going to do relationships moving forward? Because we all have them. It's not as human beings, like, it's natural for us to want to be in a relationship with people and have connectivity and all of those things. And we can do so in a healthy way if we learn the tools for it.
Exactly. And you know what? This reminds me of we were having dinner at Ethos and we were having a conversation about age appropriate conversations and how we can actually teach consent and boundaries at a young age without talking about relationships, without talking about intimate details, without talking about sex. We can have these conversations early in a productive way. So you mentioned, I will let you explain it, but to kind of follow up where you mentioned, it was about sharing is caring and that messaging.
The conversation we talked about, it was surrounding consent, and I was sharing, something that I learned, which was we oftentimes teach kids at a young age, like, sharing is caring, and that's true. We do want to be caring and we want to share, but sometimes there are things that, or moments or times when it's okay to say no. It's okay. No is a full sentence. Anyone should be able to say no. Children should have autonomy as well. And so having a child say, no, I don't really want to share right now, that's them setting a boundary. But teaching them how to do so in an appropriate way, like, actually, I really want to play with this toy, but here's a different one if you want to play with this, and when I'm done, you can have mine. And that sounds like that's impossible, but I've seen it firsthand. I've seen parents who have taught their kids consent while also having empathy, while also being a kind human. You could have all those things. You can set boundaries and still be a good person or a nice person. Boundaries don't mean you're a cruel person or you're like, absolutely not. Like, there's appropriate ways to handle those things. But with that specific example, it made me really think that we oftentimes say, like, sharing is caring, all of these things, but then we're taking away someone's ability to set boundaries or their ability to consent or not consent to something. And even something as simple as that, we have that in our minds. And so as we get older, we think, okay, that's a message we were taught as a child, then that might apply to other things in our lives. Like, yeah, sharing is caring as a child. That means as I'm getting older, if someone's asking for something, I might be like, well, I remember learning when I was younger, like, sharing is caring, and like, this is how I'm supposed to interact with someone. So you might give something that you're not ready to give. It could be something as simple as a pen or a pencil, or it could be something really serious as getting into a relationship with someone, or doing something that you might not fully feel comfortable with, but you have in the back of your mind, this is what I was taught, this is how I've learned how to do relationships or how to interact with people, so this must be how I'm supposed to interact with people now.
If you're not comfortable saying no, if you're not comfortable saying no because you weren't taught, it can be a lot harder as you get older in situations where peer pressure may take a role to say no and be comfortable with the no. And if someone challenges your no, to be able to say no and walk away, to not feel if someone challenges you that you have to give in. So being able to have these conversations, and parents can have these conversations too. It doesn't have to be that they only learn it in school. Parents can also have these conversations and just help their children learn that it's okay to say no, and no is a full sentence. Like you said, you don't have to justify or explain why. You can say, no, I'm not comfortable, or no, not right now, or just no.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something I even struggle with at times, is it's very easy for me to, like, say yes to stuff, and then I find myself overwhelmed with so much on my plate. And that's something that I struggle with all the time and I'm actively working on. And I think back, where does that stem from? That stems from, feeling like if I don't say yes, this person's going to leave me or abandon me. Feeling like, a yes is the only way to please someone. So let me make sure I say yes so that I'm not making anyone upset, and so I don't lose that person. And all of those things stem from what my experience was as a child, and the things I was raised understanding, hearing, and, that were constantly being validated that probably shouldn't have been. And so I think it's also important for us to think of all of the things that we learn at the ages where our minds are mendable and we're able to like, I'm trying to think of the best word, but in a place where we're easily influenced or easily, our minds can be changed or our minds can be perceived a certain way. It's important for us to make sure that we are teaching those lessons to people at age appropriate ways, of course, of like, the foundation of what is to come in the future, which is as they're, becoming young adults or whatever.
I completely relate and resonate with your experience too. I will say yes to a million things until I'm sleeping an hour or two a night or going 24, 36 hours straight without sleeping and then end up on the floor crying because I'm overexhausted. Because the messaging I received when I was younger was to give and to give and to give, and never to give to myself first and to wait till I was at that point where I couldn't handle anymore to then take a break.
Yeah.
And it's so important to recognize how small messaging in our early experiences really can play a role in so many different ways, not just in our relationships, but in our schoolwork and our professional life and our social life and just in all these different aspects. So it's so important, like we've said this entire time, to be having those conversations because it can play out in so many different ways throughout our lives.
Absolutely. I think something I often have to remind myself is the same kindness and empathy I show to others, I have to give to myself. And that's something I like literally write on my desk, have hanging on my desk at work, have it on my laptop, on my phone. And that's what I bring myself back to when I have those moments of like, where I'm not following, the things I say. Sometimes I don't follow myself. And that's like a great reminder for me is like, the way you're showing up for others, you also need to show up for yourself.
I am writing that down because it's such a good reminder. Now, as we're beginning to wrap up, can you tell everyone a little bit more about the resources, or again, just restating those resources that are offered by Women in Distress and how people can reach out and learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have that crisis hotline. So the Women in Distress crisis hotline number is 954 761 1133. So anytime you're experiencing or might know someone who's experiencing domestic violence, they can call that number and speak to someone in real time who can help them navigate what they're going through. We also provide other services, various services, from education and prevention to outreach and therapy, things like that. We offer injunction for protections for people who, are actively in a situation and need that protection order, the restraining order. We offer our emergency shelter as well as our pet shelter for those who have pets with them. We can help someone with safety planning if they call our crisis hotline. We also have a podcast ourselves, the education and prevention team, called An Ounce of Prevention. We have social media that you can follow and, stay updated on different things. The month of October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so we do a lot of events and a lot of different things to bring awareness to the issue. But that doesn't, it doesn't stop at the end of October. It's something that's ongoing. And so constantly bringing that awareness and kind of talking about this. And if I was going to tell anyone, an action step or something that they can do is get plugged in with somewhere local to you, and learn more about the resources that you have local to you, because they could help someone one day. There have been times where I've been talking to someone in the grocery store and, they've disclosed something, or they know what I do for work because I'm wearing my lanyard, I'm on my lunch break, or if I'm, I decide to disclose what I do for work for whatever reason, just in general. And I have people come to me now. I've had people actively in situations who I pull out my phone and give them the crisis hotline. They're able to, call in real time. And also realizing that not everyone is going to use the same resources. So making sure that you're not telling someone what to do, but encouraging them and telling them these are the resources available. What do you want to do? How can I best support you? And really actively listening to what they say.
Alisa, you have been full of so much amazing information, especially with that resources and giving someone a guide and encouragement, but not telling them specifically what to do, because we often want to solve people's problems and solve the situations they're in. But like you've said so many times throughout this conversation, it's different for everyone. Everyone's experience is different. The resources, the steps people need to take are different, and that's okay. So educating ourselves on what resources are available and giving people that encouragement, support, resources, just that list of resources available can really make all the difference. Thank you so much for joining me for today's conversation.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website, inspiringmygeneration.org, to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.